Most men think that making a woman feel desired means giving her everything up front: attention, validation, admiration. They flood the interaction with compliments, conversation, and eagerness. But what they don't realize is that this strategy doesn't create attraction, it kills it. The moment you fully reveal your interest too soon, you remove all tension. You remove the mystery. You remove the very thing that ignites desire, uncertainty. Machiavelli understood the power of withholding. Not out of cruelty, but out of strategy. He knew that people obsess over what they can't fully have. And in the realm of attraction, this law becomes gospel. The man who is seen but doesn't speak, who watches but doesn't pursue, who notices but doesn't chase, that man commands the entire frame of the interaction without saying a single word. Imagine walking into a room. You see her. She sees you. But instead of approaching her like every other man, you do something radical. You pause. You hold eye contact just a moment longer than expected. Then you move on. No smile, no signal, no validation. And suddenly, something changes. Her mind activates. Did he see me? Why didn't he come over? Was I not enough? That pause, that hesitation isn't weakness, it's control. It plants a seed in her mind, a question she can't immediately answer. And the human brain hates unanswered questions, especially when it comes to attraction. When you make her feel watched, but not yet chosen, you create an emotional tension that most men never achieve. You're not ignoring her, and you're not playing hard to get in a juvenile way. You're asserting that your attention is earned, not given. She feels seen, but not claimed. Aware that she's on your radar, yet unsure where she stands. That feeling alone can be intoxicating to a woman who's used to being chased, adored, and instantly validated. This isn't about being manipulative. It's about rebalancing a dynamic that most men unknowingly sabotage. Women are biologically wired to value what they earn. When your interest comes in pieces, not all at once, it feels valuable. It feels rare. And the rarer something feels, the more addictive it becomes. You create space for her to wonder, to lean in, to try to impress you. That's the key. You don't give her a prize. You make her qualify for it. And this rule doesn't just apply to strangers or early interactions. Even in long-term relationships and marriages, the man who keeps an element of restraint, the man who doesn't always show all his cards, continues to spark curiosity and desire. It's the difference between being comfortable and being captivated, between being her emotional safety net and being the man she can't stop thinking about. The truth is, power isn't loud. It's not needy. Power is presence. It's felt in the man who observes with calm awareness, the man who doesn't need to prove anything. When you walk into a room and carry yourself like a man who chooses deliberately, you change the entire emotional temperature. Your silence speaks, your restraint intrigues, and suddenly she's not assessing whether she likes you, she's wondering if she's good enough for you. That is the Machiavellian edge, the ability to flip the frame without confrontation, to make her lean in without ever chasing, to turn the table not through manipulation but through mastery of your own presence. You don't win her over by giving more. You win by controlling what you give when you give it and why it matters. Make her feel watched but not chosen, and you'll be the only man she can't forget. In a world that moves too fast, speaks too much, and reacts to everything, stillness has become rare and therefore powerful. Most men lose control of a room not because they say the wrong things, but because they move too quickly, speak too nervously, and react too emotionally. The moment a woman senses that your emotions are easily swayed, that your center is fragile, she instinctively pulls back. Because emotional instability is repelling while composure is magnetizing. A Machiavellian man understands this truth at his core: the one who governs himself governs others. And stillness, calm, measured, unshakable stillness is the ultimate form of self-governance. Picture this. You're on a date and she tests you. Maybe she makes a sarcastic remark, flirts with another man, or tries to push your emotional buttons. Most men fall into the trap. They laugh, nervously defend themselves, over-explain, or lash out. But a man who understands the art of stillness does something completely different. he does almost nothing. He holds her gaze. He gives a subtle smile, not as a performance, but as a signal I saw that. And I'm not shaken. He doesn't react. He doesn't flinch. And in that silence, he creates tension. Not the kind that pushes people away, but the kind that draws them in. Because stillness makes people uncomfortable in the best way. It forces them to feel their own energy. When you don't react, you make them react to you. Your calm becomes a challenge. Your composure becomes a mirror. It reflects their chaos back at them. And women, whether consciously or not, are deeply affected by this. They feel it. They lean into it. Because it's rare. It's dominant. It feels like safety, but not the boring kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that says, I'm not controlled by anything, not even you. Now take that same concept into a relationship or marriage. Your partner is emotional. She's criticizing, yelling, testing boundaries. She wants a fight, wants you to match her chaos. Why? Because she wants to feel your emotional reaction. But when you stay calm, when you don't argue, don't justify, don't escalate, you shift the dynamic. You rise above the emotional storm, and she has no choice but to adjust to your frequency. Your energy becomes the anchor. Your silence becomes the message. You're not ignoring her, you're asserting control. Control over yourself. And through that control over the entire interaction, this is not coldness. It's presence. It's strength. It's the ability to be fully there without losing your center. The man who embodies this becomes unforgettable because he's not desperate to prove anything. He's not trying to win arguments or earn validation. He's grounded, and that grounding gives him gravity, emotional gravity. The kind that keeps a woman orbiting around him not because he pulled her in, but because he refused to chase. Machiavelli would call this governing by restraint. In today's language, it means mastering the art of non-reaction, not because you're indifferent, but because you've outgrown the need to be emotionally led by others. You're not afraid of silence. You're not afraid of tension. You let the discomfort sit, and in doing so, you show that you're the one in control. Here's the emotional truth most men never learn. The man who doesn't flinch under pressure, who stays still while others scramble, becomes the one everyone subconsciously looks to. In her eyes, that's not just attractive, that's irresistible. Because in a chaotic world, stillness is the rarest form of strength, and she will always crave the man who can hold it. Most men try to gain respect by talking. They declare their values, preach their boundaries, and verbalize their expectations. I don't tolerate disrespect, they say. I need loyalty. I want honesty. But here's the uncomfortable truth: they're not commanding respect. They're begging for it. And the moment you have to explain your standards, you've already lost the battle. Because true standards aren't spoken. They're felt. A Machiavellian man doesn't tell people how to treat him. He silently enforces it through what he allows, what he ignores, and most importantly, what he walks away from without a word. You don't need to say, I won't tolerate disrespect. You need to show it in how quickly your presence disappears when it's violated. Because your energy, your time, and your attention, they are privileges. And privileges are not negotiated. They are earned. The man who silently withdraws his presence when disrespected is infinitely more powerful than the man who explains, complains, or demands better treatment. Why? Because silence is clarity. It tells her everything she needs to know, not with words, but with absence. Imagine you're dating someone casually. One night she flirts with another man in front of you. It's subtle, maybe even playful. She wants a reaction. She wants to test you. The average man either gets angry and confrontational or nervous and accommodating. Both responses reek of insecurity. But the man with quiet standards doesn't react. He doesn't argue. He doesn't scold. He simply becomes emotionally colder. The warmth fades. The conversation shortens. He finishes the evening calmly, and the next day he's less available, more focused, unbothered. No drama, no explanation. Just a shift in energy so sharp and undeniable it forces her to reflect. That reflection is where the power is born. Because now she's thinking, did I go too far? Did I cross a line? Why does he feel distant? That internal dialogue creates more impact than any lecture could, and more importantly, it puts the burden of respect on her shoulders where it belongs. She realizes your approval isn't automatic, your connection isn't unconditional, and your attention isn't desperate, it's earned and it can be lost. This principle applies tenfold in long-term relationships. Maybe your partner starts undermining your goals, nagging you about your mission, questioning your ambition. You don't need to yell. You don't need to argue. You simply refocus. You remove emotional engagement where there is no alignment. You reward respect with presence, and you respond to sabotage with distance. This trains her psychology not through punishment, but through natural consequences. When your respect becomes the currency of your presence, she learns to value both. Machiavelli understood that laws are most powerful when unspoken, when people adjust not because you told them to, but because they feel they must. That's where real influence lives, in the silent correction, in the felt consequence, in the quiet withdrawal that creates space for reflection and realignment. The man who operates this way doesn't need to convince anyone of his worth. He simply walks in it. And when that worth is challenged, he disappears. This is how you radiate quiet standards. You don't advertise them. You live them. You don't argue for respect. You remove access. And that subtle act sends a thunderous message. I am not a man who tolerates less than what I offer. Here's the emotional truth. Women don't fall for words, they fall for gravity. And nothing creates more gravity than a man who treats his time, energy, and attention like rare currency. When she sees that crossing your line doesn't trigger noise but distance, that's when your standards stop being rules and start becoming law. Most men walk into a room trying to be noticed. They scan for eye contact, flash a smile, maybe crack a joke to seem charming. But in doing so, they signal one thing loud and clear: neediness. The need to be seen, the need to be validated, the need for someone to make them feel valuable. But a man who understands power doesn't move that way. He doesn't enter with the energy of "look at me." He enters with the presence of "I see everything." And that difference changes everything. The Machiavellian man signals availability but never hunger. He lets the world know he exists, but makes it clear that his attention is earned, never offered cheaply. Presence is magnetic when it's paired with self-containment. Imagine walking into a room where people are scattered, mingling, performing, trying. And then there's you. You walk in with calm purpose. Your back is straight, your movements are intentional. Your eyes survey not out of nervousness but awareness. You're not there to impress. You're there because you chose to be. You lock eye contact briefly with a few people, maybe her, and then you move on, unshaken, uninterested in proving anything. That subtle restraint flips the entire frame, because now you're the mystery. Now you're the one who doesn't need attention but draws it anyway. Women feel this difference instantly. While other men fight for scraps of attention, the man who controls his presence radiates quiet power. He's not chasing, he's choosing. That energy is rare, and what's rare becomes desirable. You may only exchange a glance, a nod, or nothing at all, but the absence of eagerness creates a kind of tension that lingers. She starts wondering, why didn't he engage? Is he taken? Is he uninterested, or does he just have standards? And that question, unanswered, is the spark that lights desire. In contrast, the man who seeks validation immediately collapses his power. The moment you try to force connection, you reveal your emotional dependence on it. But when you allow attention to come to you and control how much of yourself you give back, you create leverage. You become the one who sets the tempo, the one who chooses when to open and when to withhold. That unpredictability creates emotional intensity. Because now she isn't reacting to your energy, you've positioned her to chase yours. This doesn't stop at first impressions. Even inside relationships or marriage, this principle holds true. Let's say your partner starts taking your presence for granted. She interrupts your focus, questions your priorities, or disrespects your time. The average man gets defensive, argues, or over-explains. But the man who signals availability only when it's met with alignment simply shifts his energy elsewhere. He becomes cooler, more centered, more selective. No punishment, no loud confrontation, just quiet recentering around his purpose. Suddenly she feels it. the warmth is gone. The access she had is now conditional. Not because you're cold, but because you're no longer feeding energy into chaos. And this subtle shift makes her recalibrate. She senses she's not entitled to your attention. She has to earn it again. That's where obsession is born, not in words, but in the invisible pull between presence and withdrawal. Machiavelli taught, declare nothing. Let your actions reveal your law. In modern language, that means stop chasing. Let your stillness speak. Let your decisions teach. Because a man who moves like he already has value doesn't beg for approval, he becomes the standard others want to meet. That's the art signal that you're open, but only to those who move with respect, depth, and intention. In that silence, you don't just attract attention, you command it. And once a woman feels the weight of your selective energy, she'll crave it like air. In today's world, everyone rushes. They rush to speak, to respond, to fill the silence. But what most men fail to realize is that silence isn't a weakness, it's a weapon. And when used correctly, it becomes one of the most powerful psychological tools in the arsenal of a high-value man. The Machiavellian man understands that every pause, every beat of silence creates invisible pressure, and pressure, when subtle, is what makes her think, feel, and chase. Most men lose the game of attraction not because they say the wrong thing, but because they say too much too soon, too fast. They remove all the mystery before it even has time to build. When you speak without rushing, when you pause before responding, when you let the silence sit just a little longer than expected, you force her mind to work. And the human brain is addicted to filling in blanks. In conversation, that silence becomes a vacuum of curiosity. She begins to wonder, what is he thinking? Did I say something wrong? Is he testing me? The moment she starts analyzing your silence, you've already created emotional engagement without lifting a finger. Imagine this. You're on a date. She says, "You're really quiet. Do you always sit like that?" The average man would nervously laugh and say, "Oh no, I'm just a little shy at first." He tries to break the tension with words. But you, the man who understands micro pauses, you hold her gaze. You wait. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Just long enough to feel the silence push against her comfort zone. And then calmly, confidently, you respond, "Only when I'm observing." That's it. 1 sentence. But the way you deliver it with that pause makes it 10 times more powerful. Why? Because it wasn't just what you said, it was the space you allowed around it. This tactic doesn't end with dating, it applies even more inside committed relationships. Let's say your partner is emotional, maybe even accusatory. You don't care the way you used to. She says, baiting a defensive reaction. Most men jump in. That's not true, of course I care. But a man with composure doesn't react. He breathes, he pauses. He waits not out of avoidance, but control. And then when he does speak, his voice is calm and grounded. I care. I just don't panic. That delivery cuts deeper than any heated argument ever could, because it shows emotional control. And emotional control is emotional dominance. Machiavelli once said, "Silence unsettles the uncertain." He knew that the unknown is more powerful than the obvious. In a world that over-communicates, the man who uses silence becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is where obsession lives. When she can't read you, when you don't instantly react, she invests more energy trying to decode you. Every moment of delayed validation becomes a thread of curiosity, and the more she invests mentally, the more emotionally attached she becomes. Here's the psychological truth. Tension is attractive when it's subtle and controlled. Think of it like tuning a string instrument. Too loose, there's no sound. Too tight, it snaps. But just enough tension. That's where the music plays. Your pauses are the tension. The silence between your words is where attraction grows. Because in that space you give her something most men never do, a moment to feel the mystery. So train yourself to pause. Pause before answering. Pause before reacting. Pause even before smiling. Not as a trick, but as a way to take back control of the emotional tempo. Because the man who masters the pause doesn't just speak to be heard, he speaks to be remembered. And she won't remember the man who talked the most. She'll remember the one whose silence made her feel the most. There's a fine line between curiosity and thirst, and most men cross it without even realizing it. They believe that asking dozens of questions, showing endless interest, and being overly attentive will make a woman feel special. But it doesn't. It makes her feel like the prize and you like the applicant. When your curiosity becomes excessive, uncontrolled, or too eager, it doesn't make you look engaged. It makes you look needy. And nothing kills attraction faster than a man who seems desperate to know everything about her. The Machiavellian man, by contrast, is curious, but only in small, intentional doses. He doesn't chase her stories. He makes her qualify to share them. Controlled curiosity is about knowing when to engage and when to let her talk into silence. It's about holding back just enough so she leans in. Most men flood the conversation with enthusiasm, thinking that by being a good listener, they're building connection. But what they're actually doing is inverting the power dynamic. They're working for her. They're pouring energy into her without asking her to earn any of theirs. And when a man gives too much without being selective, his attention stops feeling valuable. It becomes cheap, predictable, expected. Imagine sitting across from her on a first date. She's animated, talking about her travels, her job, her opinions. The average man leans forward, nods eagerly, and fires off one question after another. Where did you go? What was it like? Who did you meet? That's amazing. But you stay still. You're attentive but measured. You listen but don't overreact. Then when the moment is right, you drop a single sharp question. What did all that teach you about people? And then silence. Let her fill the space. Let her think. Let her qualify her experience, not just describe it. That one question, delivered with calm restraint, does more than a dozen generic compliments ever could, because it flips the energy. It makes her work for your approval. It makes her feel seen, but not yet validated. Even inside relationships, this principle holds true. Your partner comes home frustrated from work. Most men step into therapist mode. What happened? What did your boss say? Did you try talking to HR? They try to fix everything. But the Machiavellian man doesn't rush in to solve what isn't his to solve. He doesn't carry emotions that don't belong to him. He holds space, but not responsibility. He simply says, "That sounds heavy. How do you want to handle it?" And then he lets the silence sit. He invites reflection, not dependency. He supports, without absorbing. This level of emotional clarity tells her something critical. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to respect your ability to save yourself. And that boundary makes you different. It makes you trustworthy. Not just as a partner, but as a man who has emotional discipline. Women don't want a man who mirrors their every mood. They want a man who can hold the storm without getting soaked in it. Controlled curiosity is how you prove that, not by talking more, but by asking less with more precision. Machiavelli taught, appear open, but reveal nothing unnecessary. That means you don't need to spill your life story to build connection. You reveal just enough to spark interest, and then you pull back. Let her ask. Let her wonder. Let her work. The more energy she invests in trying to understand you, the more bonded she becomes to your mystery. That's the key. So observe more than you inquire. Let her chase your attention. Let her feel the subtle difference between a man who wants to know her and a man who needs to. The first makes her curious. The second makes her cautious. When your interest is measured, she doesn't feel desired, she feels chosen. And that, more than charm or effort, is what makes you unforgettable. Attraction isn't created when you give a woman what she wants. It's created in the space between her effort and your approval. Most men sabotage this space by collapsing it too soon. The moment she does something thoughtful, flattering, or even slightly flirtatious, they reward it instantly. You're amazing. You're so beautiful. I'm lucky to have you. It feels romantic to them, even respectful. But in truth, it kills the very tension that makes her chase. The dopamine hit lands too early. The reward is too easy. And what comes easy rarely holds any weight. A Machiavellian man does the opposite. He understands that delayed validation is the secret to long-term obsession. Think of attention and approval like currency. The moment you give too much of it without effort on her part, you devalue it. She no longer has to earn it. She simply expects it. And what's expected becomes ordinary. But the man who waits, the one who pauses, who makes her wonder, who gives his praise with surgical timing, he becomes unforgettable. Because every time she tries to impress him, there's no immediate reward. There's a pause, a gap, a moment of uncertainty. And in that moment, her mind becomes consumed by a single question. Was it enough? Imagine this. She walks into the room wearing a new dress. She clearly wants your reaction. The average man instantly says, "Wow, you look stunning." But you lock eyes with her for half a second, then return to what you were doing. You give no comment, no smile. You just continue. And internally, she feels the shift. She starts wondering, did he notice? Why didn't he say anything? Was it not enough that subtle lack of reaction builds far more tension than a compliment ever could? Then maybe an hour later, when she's not expecting it, you lean in and say, "That dress you wore earlier, you carried it well." And just like that, your approval lands like thunder. It was delayed. It was rare. And because of that, it was treasured. This dynamic works even more powerfully inside long-term relationships. Let's say she cooks your favorite meal. Most men jump in with praise after the first bite. "This is amazing. You're the best." But you again hold the moment. You enjoy the meal. You stay present, but you say nothing at first. Later that night, when she's relaxed, when she's forgotten she even expected feedback, you turn to her and say, "That dinner, you nailed it." The praise comes when it's least expected, which is exactly why it feels earned. Machiavelli warned, "Make your favor rare, and it will be treasured." And that lesson applies directly to male-female dynamics. When your validation is measured, it doesn't weaken the connection, it intensifies it. It tells her that she's not entitled to your praise, that your admiration isn't automatic. She has to work for it. And that work creates emotional investment. Because people value what they earn, not what they're given freely. You're not being cold. You're not being emotionally distant. You're creating what psychologists call a controlled reward loop. She gives effort. She doesn't know if it was enough. Then days later, hours later, your subtle praise arrives. And because it didn't come immediately, it lands deeper. It becomes memorable, scarce, powerful. This is the foundation of psychological obsession. Here's the truth. Most men miss you don't attract her by constantly feeding her validation. You attract her by letting her hunger for it, by letting her work for your approval, by letting her feel the slow burn of uncertainty, and then surprising her with rare, genuine praise when she's earned it. That more than anything else makes her crave you not for what you say, but for what you withhold until it truly matters. In a world that glorifies constant expression, over-explanation, and emotional openness, the quiet man often goes unnoticed until he doesn't. One of the deepest truths from this video is that real power, influence, and attraction are rarely loud. They're built through restraint, self-control, and presence. The core message isn't just about dating, it's about how we carry ourselves in every area of life. When you stop chasing validation and start mastering your energy, people respond differently. You stop being a reaction to others and you start becoming the standard others respond to. The man who can control his reactions in tense moments, who pauses before he speaks, who withholds his approval until it's earned, that man is respected. Not because he demands it, but because his discipline commands it. Whether it's in relationships, your career, or daily social interactions, the same principle applies. The less you try to be liked, the more people are drawn to you. Scarcity creates value. Presence without desperation creates curiosity. Standards, when enforced, silently carry more weight than words ever will. So the real takeaway is this: don't always explain, don't always respond, and don't always give. Instead, observe, withhold. Let people work for your attention, your time, your validation. When you do this, you not only raise your value in others' eyes, you raise it in your own. You become the calm force in a chaotic world. And whether it's love leadership or life, people are magnetically drawn to the ones who don't need them, but choose them with intention.